Welcome to this episode of 10 Minutes with Sam, and this is Akshat Singh. Our guest for today is Mr. Sugeeswara Senadhira. He's joining us from Sri Lanka. For those of you who don't know, Sir is a renowned journalist. He is a very prominent diplomat, and he currently serves as the Director for International Media and Research at the Presidential Secretariat in Sri Lanka. We're glad to have you on the show today, sir.
Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be with you.
So the format of our show is fairly simple. We'll try covering as much as we can in 10 minutes. So let me get right to the first question, sir. Sir, we saw that recently the parliamentary elections in Sri Lanka got over, and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa's party won a staggering two-thirds majority. With this sort of majority, what do you think are the government's policy priorities?
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, in his election manifesto of presidential election November 2019, spelled out his priorities in his manifesto, Vistas of Splendor and Prosperity. That mandate given to him to implement that manifesto was reiterated overwhelmingly by the people at the parliamentary election, in which Podujana Peramuna of Mahinda Rajapaksa managed to win two-thirds majority. Of the priorities, the main one goes to local production, import reductions, attainment of self-sufficiency in food and export crops. For that, a series of programs have been taken by the government, including free fertilizer to farmers, soft loans, in cutting down the rate, interest rate by 50%, and various facilities to upgrade and introduce high tech into the agricultural sector. Similarly, the fisheries sector also has been taken into consideration. All the small harbors are being renovated for use for multi-day trawlers, for that fishermen could go out for several days to the sea and increase fish catchment. Because President Rajapaksa thinks that it is ridiculous that we continue to import fish when we are an island nation. So these are the priorities right now.
So these are largely the domestic priorities that the president has. Let's try to shift our perspective to a more international region. So we recently saw that on the UN's 75th anniversary, the president made a remark about the UN not interfering in the domestic decisions of a country. What do you think this jibe was in the context for, and who do you think it was directed at?
This is not an unusual thing. It is well within the government policy. The UN system needs to ensure equity, inclusivity, and transparency while being more responsive to the ever-changing global environment. So we have been told, at the time when we withdrew from the United Nations Human Rights Commission's 30/1 resolution, which was co-sponsored by Sri Lanka together with US and few others. We withdrew from that because we found it is an interference in the local affairs, and also it was not in line with the constitution of Sri Lanka. Certain provisions we could not even think of implementing. They were included in that resolution.
So let's try to shift our focus to some further international issues, sir. There has recently been a sort of growing animosity between India and China, and Sri Lanka has been a friend to both these countries. Between the Indian and Chinese tussle, where do you think Sri Lanka will place itself? And how do you think Sri Lanka will act, especially given its strategic importance in the Indian Ocean region?
Well, our ties with India goes back to a millennium. Since ancient times, and we had very close links, trade links as well as political links. 2,500 years ago, we got the greatest gift from India, Buddhism. that was still the most binding factor of in Sri Lanka relations, because for the large majority of Sri Lankans, India is the land of Buddha. So that shows how close it is religiously and spiritually, and also geographically, you are our immediate neighbors. So there is, as Sri Lankan leaders have repeatedly said, Sri Lanka is committed to follow a neutral foreign policy with no affiliations to any particular country or power bloc. Both President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda have affirmed the nation's India first security policy. It is a clear elucidation of the Sri Lankan state view. Furthermore, Sri Lanka will not allow what may be tantamount to security risks or security stakes to a foreign country. This gives the assurance to India that we will never permit our soil or waters to be used by any external entity to launch an attack or hostile to India. China, on the other hand, is the strongest economic partner. As India's External Affairs Ministry rightly stated recent statement, India's relations with Sri Lanka is absolutely independent of India's relations with third country. Similarly, Sri Lanka's relations, or any other country for that matter, are independent of Sri Lanka's relationship with the third country. So Sri Lanka's relationship with India is much more than economic partnership and trade relationship. It's more, it goes to more brotherhood, and as President Mahinda Rajapaksa once said, India is a relation and others are friends.
Absolutely, sir. I think that brilliantly sums it up. My next question to you about that would be that we know that there's a certain culture of growing animosity between the two countries, and between this segment, the prime ministers of India and Sri Lanka have decided to host a virtual summit. So first part of the question is, what do you think this virtual summit is for? Second part is, do you think it is a signal for the rest of the world showing the alliance between Sri Lanka and India, especially at a time when we are locking horns with China?
I don't think it has anything to do with China. This is purely, we have practice of immediately after getting elected to visit Delhi. Some calls it Delhi Darshan. See, President Rajapaksa went to Delhi immediately after he got elected. And Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa is also very keen to go there, but unfortunately due to COVID-19 pandemic situation, it is not, he is not able to go. So the virtual summit is purely for, the keeping the highest level contacts alive. That has been the practice for so many years, even when we had certain differences prior to signing of 1987 in the Sri Lanka agreement and so on. Even then we had top level contacts continuously to ensure that there won't be any unnecessary flare-ups in relations. So relations are kept cool by this sort of interaction. And it's part of the Sri Lanka relations.
All right, sir. That brings us to the end of 10 minutes. Once again, thank you so much for being with us on the show today. It was lovely speaking with you and getting a perspective from Sri Lanka. And we definitely hope to speak with you sometime soon.
Thanks again for inviting me, and I enjoyed the chat. Thank you.